What's going on, guys? Here's my review of NXT, which took place February 27th. Booker T back on commentary alongside Vic Joseph after being away for several weeks. They mentioned just 39, well now it's 38 days until Stand and Deliver. That's the same day as WrestleMania Night 1. NXT Champion starts off the show, Ilya Dragunov. He was interrupted early by Carmelo Hayes. Melo had about, 8 security guards with him or so. Long story short, Dragunov took out a few of the security guards who jumped on the apron, and the rest of them wanted no part. And at the end of this show, we would then again see NXT Champion Ilya Dragunov and Carmelo Hayes. Now, the first matchup, we had Kelani Jordan versus Kiana James. Kiana James won thanks to the help of Izzy Dame, who was ringside, which I knew going into this was going to be a very likely scenario. So Izzy Dame yanked Kelani down, taking a brutal bump on the apron. Kelani went down very hard, hitting that ring apron, falling to the floor. Then Izzy Dame rolled her in for Kiana to basically pick the bones to seal the deal. Got the win. Again, I knew something like this was certainly going to take place. Now, this is back-to-back losses for Kelani Jordan, last week and now this week. Although, in her defense, there's always some type of interference. Last week, she was defeated by Lash Legend, thanks to the help of her Metaphor partner, Jakara Jackson. And now this week, losing to Kiana James, again, with a little interference and assistance by Izzy Dame. So here we had Gallows and Anderson finally making their way out for a wrestling match and not just accompanying Mishin or AJ Styles for once. The Good Brothers, or the OC as they go by, versus Edris Enofe and Malik Blade. Now this was a good match. This ended with Luke Gallows pinning Edris Enofe to get the win. Post-match, that's where business really picked up here. We had Chase U's Stu Hudson and Andre Chase addressing the OC from the crowd. They were then interrupted by Nathan Frazier and Axiom. Suddenly, out of nowhere, you see the LWOs walking wild and Cruz del Toro coming off both of the top turnbuckles, taking out the OC. We have all 6 men taking out the OC specifically. They had one common goal in mind at the time, and that's to eliminate them. OC just showed up on NXT a couple of weeks ago. And while all this chaos is breaking out, you see Braun Breaker and Baron Corbin, the current NXT Tag Team Champions, looking on at this mess. In this field of tag teams who want to eventually come at them, potentially at Stand and Deliver for those NXT Tag Team titles. Next up, we had the Prodigy, Roxanne Perez versus Jakara Jackson of Metaphor with Lash Legend. Now, I love this fierce, tenacious Roxanne Perez that we've been getting as of late. This match, by the way, Jakara's first singles match on NXT television, recently making her return from a wrist injury. So good for Jakara. Great to see her back in the ring. She has a very promising future, that's for sure. Now, in the early goings of this match, the referee tossed Lash Legend for holding on to Jakara, preventing her from being hit from a pop rocks from Roxanne Perez. However, shortly thereafter, Jakara ends up tapping out to the crossface locked in by Roxanne. Roxanne gets the win, which I thought was going to take place regardless. Again, great seeing Jakara Jackson in her first televised singles match on NXT. Again, very promising future for her, that's for sure. Now, after this, it led to a backstage segment with Thea Hale and Jacy Jayne. Now, we see this continued tease of their split, where Jacy Jayne calls Fallon Henley a loser, as well as Andre Chase and Duke Hudson, talking about how she single-handedly had to save Chase U at NXT Vengeance Day by selling calendars to keep Chase U's doors open. I mean, she's not wrong. Technically speaking, she is a heel, but she's not wrong. So along comes Kiana James with Izzy Dame, also poking fun at Fallon Henley. Now, ironically enough, last year at NXT Vengeance Day, Kiana James and Fallon Henley won those NXT Tag Team Championships by defeating Kaden Carter and Katana Chance, who are both on Monday Night Raw now. And so following that, Kiana wanted to hear more about the calendars, as all the women left Thea Hale behind. So I'm looking forward to seeing this continued tease and eventual split of Thea Hale and Jacy Jayne. Now we see the OC confront Corbin and Breaker backstage, looking for an opportunity at those NXT Tag Team titles. Now, I'm thinking possibly at Stand and Deliver on April 6th. It makes sense. Have them win there. Breaker, officially a member of Friday Night SmackDown as of a week or two ago. So it just makes a lot of sense. Give the OC some much-needed momentum. They haven't done anything with the Good Brothers the last year and a half since they returned October of 2022. So, hey, why not? Following this, we had a singles bout, DIJAK versus Luca Crusifino. Now, this was my first time seeing Luca Crusifino in the ring. I've seen him for many months now, backstage, promos, segments, vignettes, and so on. But this was a very vicious, physical matchup. Chopping the hell out of one another, these two. But it ended with DIJAK getting the victory. But first, a clothesline, a big boot, hitting his finish. Again, got the victory, but early on in the match, it looked like DIJAK was almost put out by Luca. Outside by the commentary table, he was hit viciously. It looked like he was favoring his right side of his neck, right shoulder, maybe even going down to the back. So he had quite a few receipts for Luca as this match wore on from that spot. Now backstage, we have Noam Dar with Oro Mensah, with Kelly Kincaid talking about going up against one of the 4 of the No Quarter Catch crew and later in the night for the main event, and that it doesn't faze him which one of those 4 members that he faces, and he'll be ready for anything. You know, he's been the Heritage Cup champion for quite some time now, a multi-time Heritage Cup champion, and so that was pretty much that. Next up, we hear from the NXT Women's Champion, Lara Valkyrie. She wished Jacy a speedy recovery after tearing her ACL during their match last week. She goes on to say, "Shotzi, when you do come back, I'll be waiting for you and for that title opportunity as promised." Now look, Lara certainly means well by saying this, but I highly doubt she's still going to be the NXT Women's Champion come the tail end of 2024 when Shotzi is due to return. You know, it's about, roughly 9 months rehabbing from a torn ACL, but we'll see. She meant well. Following that, she says, "Lash Legend. She showed up, showed out, and stepped up in her absence last week. Lash Legend. Kudos to her. She did double duty last week, defeating Kelani Jordan earlier in the night, then having to fill in for the injured Shotzi. So that was huge." So when Lara gets in the ring, calls out Tatum Paxley. Paxley makes her way out, tells Lara she would do anything for her, as Lara and all of us already know. She's proven that she's a woman of her word. Lara said, "I promised you a surprise." Says next week they'll be teaming together after speaking to NXT General Manager Ava, and they'll be taking on the WWE Women's Tag Team Champions, the Kabuki Warriors, Asuka and Kairi Sane, at Roadblock. So that's huge. I fully expect to see the Kabuki Warriors retain, of course, but this is a great opportunity for Lara Valkyrie and Tatum Paxley, so we'll see what happens. Following this, they were interrupted actually by Ridge Holland. He thanked them for stepping aside. He had some business to attend to. Says his actions as of late have gotten him in certain predicaments. Shortly thereafter, the lights went out. Now the teases we've been seeing for weeks with worded prompts in black and white on the screen. And this time it said truth will ultimately prevail, but there is pain bringing it to light. Suddenly, someone appears behind Ridge Holland. Weren't sure who it was. It was still dark. There was a bit of a spotlight cast on him. And he strikes Ridge Holland in the back with a steel chair by none other than Shawn Spears, formerly known as Ty Dillinger in NXT. He's been gone for the better part of 5 years. Shortly after his departure of WWE 5 years ago, he went to AEW, had a mediocre run over there, but he's back. It seems like the chairman, Shawn Spears, not returning as his former WWE alias, again, Ty Dillinger. Seems like he's sticking with a similar heel character he had in AEW, so that's cool, that's very interesting, and all of this was very unexpected. So Shawn Spears has arrived in NXT, and we'll see what that means going forward. Now here we had Von Wagner with Mr. Stone versus Lexis King. This was a brief match. Von Wagner rolled up King for the victory. However, that was not the end of things. Sore loser Lexis King attacked Von Wagner post-match, also took out Mr. Stone with his finisher, hitting him with the coronation. Following that, we had a women's match, singles bout between Gigi Dolan versus Out the Mud's Jada Parker. Now these two, they're very good. You know, Gigi we've seen for a very long time, even outside of WWE, as Priscilla Kelly. Jada Parker, she's new to most of us. She debuted on NXT, a month or two ago, joining OTM, and she's been doing good. Wrestling-wise, persona-wise, I'm liking what I'm seeing. Now, during this match, it was interrupted by Ariana Grace, who's been quite the hindrance to Gigi Dolan as of late. Grace gets up on the apron, interferes, holding Dolan's arm at one point. Dolan, though, headbutts Grace to the mat. Parker took full advantage of this moment and hits her with her finisher. I'm not sure what it's called. It's some kind of a running fist to the ground for the 1-2-3. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen from this with Ariana Grace and Gigi Dolan going forward. Maybe they get a match at Stand and Deliver. Maybe they'll just have a match in the coming weeks on NXT. Now it's finally time for the main event for this Heritage Cup, the No Quarter Catch crew. Which one of the 4 will be going up against the current champion, Noam Dar? Ended up being Charlie Dempsey. Now, Charlie Dempsey scored the first fall in the first round within the first 2 minutes of this matchup, which was pretty surprising to me. And following that first pinfall attempt, a successful pinfall attempt at that, Damon Kemp of the faction then hit Nom Dar with a cheap shot following that round. I don't think the referee had caught on to that. Now, we had no winners in round 2 or 3 of this Heritage Cup rules match. although Dar scored an early victory in the 4th round to tie it at 1 apiece. We see interference from all angles going into this 5th round. We see Miles Bourne, Damon Kemp, Drew Gulak, all interfering on each and every corner. I said, this is not good for Noam Dar. All he had out there was, I believe, Oro Mensah. I'm not even sure if the ladies were out there, Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend. Either way, they were outnumbered, that's for sure. And this led to a suplex from Charlie Dempsey, who scored the pinfall victory on Noam Dar, becoming the new recipient of the Heritage Cup. And so that's that. The No Quarter Catch crew gets some gold. And Charlie Dempsey, he's the new Heritage Cup champion. We'll see what this means for the faction. Now, following this, as NXT was wrapping up, well, actually, I got to get to the last part between Ilya Dragunov and Carmelo Hayes, although this was the last match of the night. But they pan outside real quick. They see Shawn Spears leave the building, and he spoke in regards to striking Ridge Holland, saying the truth can bring you to your knees, quite literally. And he says, see you next week at NXT Roadblock. So I'm sure if we're not going to get the match next week between Shawn Spears and Ridge Holland, we're certainly going to get some kind of a promo or a face-to-face, I would assume. And so that match should be happening in the near future. And actually, I could see them setting up Shawn Spears and Ridge Holland for Stand and Deliver, April 6th. Now, getting to the very end of this show, NXT ending the same way that the show started. We have the NXT Championship contract signing with NXT GM Ava out there. Ilya Dragunov, the champion, makes his way out. Carmelo Hayes made his way out again. Security detail. This got interrupted very early by Tony D'Angelo. Tony D says there's only one Don, snaps his fingers, and much to our surprise, especially Carmelo Hayes, all 8 of the security fled the scene, which I thought was great. Tony D then tells Dragunov, says he wants to be the one to take the NXT title from him, not Carmelo Hayes. Tony D says he's going to earn a title match at Stand and Deliver. Ilya says that piques his interest, somebody that's actually willing to work for their spot. So next week, Carmelo Hayes versus Tony D. At Roadblock, winner gets an NXT title opportunity at Stand and Deliver against Ilya Dragunov. Dragunov tells Tony D to whoop that Mello. Nice reference to the whoop that trick. And Mello tells Tony, you can't beat me. Mello and Tony D get into an altercation. Now Dragunov runs to break it up. Tony D inadvertently hits Ilya Dragunov with an elbow, knocking him to the ground. I said, oh, this can't be good. But the good thing is, this means that Tony D's got to win next week, right? So then Mello picks up Tony D, puts him through a table as the show goes off the air. And that was pretty much that. So we're, without a shadow of a doubt, going to have Tony D beat Mello next week on NXT. And Tony D, again, versus Dragunov at Stand and Deliver. And with that being said, we should also be getting Trick Williams versus Carmelo Hayes at Stand and Deliver as well. Former friends turned enemies. And this has got to culminate and finish. And I would assume that after WrestleMania weekend, Stand and Deliver, we'll finally get Carmelo Hayes called up to the main roster. Whether it's Raw, whether it's SmackDown. But first, before that happens, Trick and Mello have to finish their differences. They need to settle things. And again, there's no need for Carmelo to fight Ilya a 4th time. They had a great feud from the summer to the early fall when Dragunov finally dethroned him. And so that will be that. I'm looking forward to it. Tony D, he is fantastic. I've liked him on NXT since he debuted late 2021 when they did the reboot of NXT 2.0. So he's fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to both of those matchups at Stand and Deliver. Tony D versus Ilya Dragunov and Carmelo Hayes versus Trick Williams.